Well, let's get to our first conversation this afternoon. In a bid to strengthen Nigeria's domestic economy and promote local content, President Bola Tinubu has initiated a policy that bars the ministries, departments, and agencies of government from procuring foreign goods or services already available locally without a written waiver from the Bureau of Public Procurement, BPP. Now, this is as the Federal Executive Council on Monday gave its approval to a new policy framework that places the country at the center of all public procurement and business activities. With a strong emphasis on empowering local industries and reducing dependency on foreign imports, the new policy, tagged the Renewed Hope Nigeria First policy, seeks to foster a new business culture that is bold, confident, and very Nigerian. Briefing State House correspondent at the end of the cabinet meeting, presided over by President Bola Tinubu at the Council Chamber, Presidential Villa in Abuja, the Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mr. Mohammed Idris, explained that the new policy is to ensure that the country promotes the homegrown products. Now, the minister described the policy as a bold shift in the country's economic approach. It mirrors United States President Donald Trump's American First doctrine. Let's talk to Mr. Johnson Chukwu. He is the founder, Group Managing Director, Cowry Asset Management Limited. Mr. Johnson Chukwu, thank you for joining the program this afternoon. It's good to have you join us.
Thank you, Tolu, for having me. Good day.
Thank you so much. Now, I think we should, of course, news is fluid. We had a pre-planned discussion, but this broke out and we needed to shift conversation. Let me ask you first and foremost, how this news comes to you is now we are talking Nigeria first, just like they're saying America first. What would you say to that, Mr. Chukwu?
So my first thought is that if you look at the intention is good, that we want to encourage government bodies or government ministries and departments patronizing made Nigerian goods and made Nigerian services or services provided by Nigerians. So the principle or the thought is positive, or the intention, I think that's the most appropriate word. The intention is good. Like they say, the devil will be in the details. I looked at what the government wants to do, and there are a couple of things that need to be done to make it a reality or to realize that intention. It's not enough to have intention. Intention is good. I mean, every one of us have always said it's good if the government starts by patronizing made in Nigerian goods. But a couple of questions that need to be addressed or answered is that how do we stimulate, how do we encourage or make it possible for Nigerian goods to prosper? How do we make it possible for businesses to start producing locally? What are those limiting or constraining factors that have killed local manufacturing in the country? We need to address that to make this situation a reality. The other thing that came to me is that the use of Nigeria first, for me, was a weak mimicking of America first. They could have been able to couch something that is more original. It looks like a cheap copy for us to now use the word Nigeria first, when Donald Trump has almost made it a sing song. I mean, I was looking for something more original, something that will be more exciting. And bear in mind that America first has created chaos. So if you are presenting anything, you're calling Nigeria chaos, Nigeria first. Probably at the back of people's mind, they are concerned that you don't create the kind of chaos similar to what Donald Trump is doing in America first. So I would have suggested something more original, more thoughtful than to just copy the chaos, the same what you call the same words or the same payoff line that Donald Trump is using to cause global chaos.
All right, then. It's a good way to start this conversation, and your comments are well noted. But looking at the fact that this is likely to help boost local production, for the likes of Dangote Refinery, sugar production, innocent vehicles, and all of that. In your thoughts too, do you think that this will outrightly help address or reduce our import bills as we move on?
Yeah, to be on paper, it looks like so. But like I said, we need to address our mind to the limiting factor, what we call the constraints that local manufacturers are facing. That, you know, if you are old enough to be in your 50s or your 60s, you will get to realize that there was a time in the 80s when almost everything was being produced locally. Nigerian businesses were pivoting away from importation and we are setting up industry. I grew up in the East. I grew up in the current state currently Abia State. And I remember when almost all the business people from my area were setting up manufacturing outfits in Aba. And then we used to have Made in Aba trade fair. When you come to that trade fair that was holding at Aba Stadium, you will virtually buy everything. We are coming from Benin Republic, people are coming from Ivory Coast, people are coming from Equatorial Guinea, Cameroon, to buy made in Nigeria, made in Aba goods. All those industries, virtually all the industries have closed down. The other time, I think late last year, I went to Port Harcourt, Trasamadi industrial layout, and I couldn't hear any single industry humming, the equipment of any single industry humming. All of them are closed down. Some of them are occupied by churches. That's one of the most, one of the biggest industrial complexes we had in Nigeria. So what are those things? You know of Aswani textile, where you have that corridor Oshodi, where you had several textile companies operating. You had the same thing in Kano and Kaduna. They've all shut down. So the question beyond the rhetorics is, what are those things that kill the industries? How do we address it so that industries can come back? If you have a policy to patronize made in Nigerian goods and the goods are not being made, you will still be at ground zero. You will still not be able to move the needle. So beyond this policy that want to encourage people to patronize made in Nigerian goods, we also need to address the issue of power supply, address the issue of policy inconsistency, address the issue of regulatory overbearing effects, including multiple taxes, address the issue of transport infrastructure, address the issue of insecurity. Some of these things are necessary for this intention of the government to encourage local manufacturing to become a reality.
A step further for me again would be the issue of standards. Before we got to this point, many will complain about how we package our products, how we do the finishings, how we do all of the work around it. Mr. Johnson, Chukwu, let's look at that too holistically. What more can be done? Are we making enough efforts? Are we deliberate about making sure that our goods and services are at par? Because that has been the bane and why everyone keeps focusing on imported goods. Because there's an argument that in some cases, we do not meet standards.
Yes, you know, those are the things I was talking of when I talked about the policy environment. But the starting point is actually to even manufacture. If you catch your mind back, and like I said, depending on what age you are, there was a time when made in Hong Kong goods were considered as inferior. There was a time when Japanese goods were considered as inferior. There was a time in the recent past, very recent past, where Taipei, Taiwan, ROC were manufacturing a lot of things before China started resurgence. And ROC products, Republic of China, which is Taiwan, was considered inferior goods. And now you move to the modern day industrial hub of the world, China. Chinese goods were until recently considered as inferior. The first thing is you have to even create a manufacturing base. When you create a manufacturing base and make it cost-effective to manufacture within your local economic space, the next level will be to introduce some level of standardization to say this must pass this quality, particularly for export products. But what happens is that when manufacturing takes root, competition will come. Competition will force competitors or businesses to improve to compete either on quality or on cost. And eventually you will have the niche producers, you have the high-end producers, you have the middle market producers, and the market products will find their levels. So, but first of all, let's even create an environment where things are being manufactured. Actually, I don't know whether you can remember a shoe company in Ojota, Bata.
Bata, yeah, Bata. Yeah, I remember that. I remember that.
I mean, parents were going there to buy Christmas shoes for their children.
I wore Bata shoes then too.
If you enter Bata shop just before schools reopen, every place parents will be flooded at their shops to buy. Those shoes were made here. Where do you have today's Bata? Which shoemaker making companies here? If you go to Abba, we had from the imitation of Abba imitation of shoes before we got to a point where they were beginning to improve on quality and standardization. And then you had the likes of Nicole's shoes that was being exported out of the country, but they all died. So let's address why these companies died. And then once we address those unhygienic factors that made it difficult for them to exist, continue to exist, then we now move to the issue of standardization and improving quality.
Okay, let's before we move to our other conversation, what do you think will be the role of states and local governments in implementing this new order by the presidency?
Well, it's something that should apply nationwide. Some states are already pushing that. I know states like Edo state government under the immediate a lot of things to encourage people to patronize nice goods that were made in Edo State. Similarly, Dr. Ali Sochi of Abia State is also pushing a lot to encourage people to patronize made in Aba goods. And I think it's something virtually, even former governor of Anambra State, Mr. Peter B, had actually said repeatedly at different fora how he encouraged the likes of Xerox Computer, which is a Nigerian-made product, including in nursing. So I believe it's something that every governor, every local government chairman should latch onto and encourage, because at the end of the day, what you want to do is grow the economy. If you grow the economy, if you grow the manufacturing activities in the economy, you're going to bake a big cake that the government will get the benefit of improved government taxes and improved government revenue.
Now let's go to other news making headlines around the world of business. Yesterday we saw CBN slashing emergency loans to federal government amid increasing debt concerns. You know, I read through that too, and I'm looking at what that means for the monetary side of the economy as they try to, you know, tighten up, if I'm allowed to use that word, considering all that we've seen, the challenges we face around that space. What do you make of this slash?
Well, some of us have actually cried ourselves thoughts that the government needs to have more prudent fiscal framework, where like we say colloquially, that you cut your coat according to your size, where the government revenue should mimic or be in tandem with government expenditure. And then we will minimize the cost of borrowing and the macroeconomic implications of government funding its expenditure by ways and means. The liquidity suffix injects into the economy that leads to higher inflation rates, pressures on exchange rate, and these two factors have direct negative impact on standard of living of Nigerians. So we have actually said that. So it's actually comforting to know that central bank lending to federal government by way of ways and means dropped from almost 8 trillion naira in 2023 to just about 3.27 trillion naira in 2024. It's actually consoling, and I hope that trend will continue. Of course, there are concerns that this year they will come under a lot more pressure because of dropping crude prices. But I have always advocated that government should adjust its expenditure to be in tandem with changes in its revenue. And if need be, if the government realizes that it can no longer continue to fund capital expenditure, particularly commercially viable capital expenditure from budgetary allocations, then it should pivot that away from budgetary government budgets to private sector funding through either build, operate, or transfer, or build, operate, and own, or any of the public-private partnership arrangements.
More on that is the fallout of the IMF and spring meetings, where a lot of commendations have come in one way or the other for Nigeria. That's with regards to the policies being implemented by government. Mr. Johnson Chukwu, we've been on this route. We've talked about this for so many times. You've appeared on this program before the removal of subsidy, the fallout and all of that. But my question to you really is, where do we go from here, considering all of the challenges on ground? Donald Trump is not helping matters with regards to his tariff back and forth and what it means for us as a country. So what do we do? I like to ask analysts like you that when we talk about interventions, what sort of interventions do we get on now, embark on, that will really trickle down? I'm talking about trickle down to the masses. Where do we go from here?
Well, so let me start from what is ailing Nigeria most. If you have an accident, the first thing to do is to stabilize you. And if you have lost blood, we infuse blood in you. And then before they even try to know whether you broke your neck or broke your backbone or your thigh bone. So the first thing at this point is that we need to stabilize the macroeconomic environment. And one of the shortest routes, and I use the word shortest route, it may not be the only route, is to address the issue of insecurity. One of the most challenging issues with the Nigerian economy today is food insecurity. And when I talk about food insecurity, it has led to increase in importation of food. It has led to high inflation rates. It has led to weakening standard of living. So if we can address the issue of insecurity in the country, particularly in northern regions, then we're going to see improvement in food production. That will reduce the pressures on food imports and also help us stabilize the exchange rate a bit. The other factor is improved crude production. And all these factors are what we may call endogenous factors. They're within the control of the government. Increased crude production. Today, OPEC is talking of increasing crude production by about over 400,000 barrels. Unfortunately, we don't even have the headroom to participate in that increment, despite the fact that that increment is going to lead to reduction in crude prices. So we're going to suffer the double whammy of lower crude prices without a commensurate increase in volume. If we increase our crude production, and remember we have actually at some point touched close to 3 million barrels a day, we're going to have more stability in the exchange rate. We're going to be less dependent or less affected by Donald Trump's induced global macroeconomic challenges. And then we will be better manage our economy, because if you have stability in your exchange rate, you have food sufficiency or food security, then we will see that in as much as the economy may not be growing as fast as we all purpose or what we desire, we have macroeconomic stability, we have stable standard of living of the citizens, the incidence of poverty will reduce. The IMF is advocating, the World Bank IMF is advocating, are claiming or projecting that we're going to have increase in our level of poverty. So we need to address those things. And I think those are the starting point before we look at other bigger issues. The other bigger issue we've actually addressed in this conversation, make Nigeria a manufacturing hub. Every country with a large population pivot their economy away from service to focus on manufacturing, because that's the only way you can create employment and create the necessary social environment that will reduce even crime in your society.
I think it is a good way to rest this conversation. I must thank you so very much for your time, Mr. Johnson Chukwu, founder, Group Managing Director, Cowry Asset Management Limited. Do enjoy the rest of your day. We thank you so much as always.
Thank you for having me.
All right then, still to come on the show today.